right, we are back with another episode of the HEF podcast. Man, Alex is coming on strong with this music. I gotta say, like every time I hear this music, it just gets my blood boiling. You know, I think I'm ready to talk about something, and then I hear this music, and I know I'm ready to talk about something. It just turns me straight on fire. All right, welcome to the HEF podcast. That's the podcast of the Home Education Foundation. The Home Education Foundation is an organization that was started in the early 90s. That's the 1990s for some of these kids who are still learning about history. And it was just after Brenda and her husband, Craig Dickinson, worked with the legislature to come up with rights for home education parents to spell out directly that a parent is and has the right to teach their own children and set their standards in ways that they see fit. Public education is an option, and it should be an option, but the parent has the direct right to teach their own children because the children belong to the parent, not to the state. And we're so thankful that she fought so hard, and her and so many others at that time, to secure the rights for parents to teach their own children and have that specifically spelled out. It's 1002.41, it's the home education statutes in Florida. And there's many other statutes that are all linked together. It's a complex web that props each of them up, and it's all nuanced and interesting, but we're so thankful for her mind, her willingness to be there, her voice that she spoke up so often, to continue over the last 40 years to add to that. Add things like dual enrollment, to add things like the Bright Futures Scholarship to be able to participate in, to advocate for home education families with children with special needs so that there are additional considerations in the other scholarship for students with special needs as they emerged. And as everything continued to grow, unfortunately, Brenda's husband passed away in the mid-90s. And out of all of the work that they had done together, they decided to name 1006.15, which is the statute that allows home education students to play sports in public schools. Yes, that goes all the way back to 1996. They decided to name that after Craig. It's called the Craig Dickinson Act. And wouldn't you know that that is something that we're protecting constantly, because it's so useful to everybody who wants to pay to participate in it. We'll get into that into more detail, but before we do that, I want to say thank you to the parents of the free state of Florida for the work that you did with our donation match challenge in August, our first annual fundraiser. You showed up in great support, and we are so thankful for you. I've got on my desk here versions of the challenge coins that went out, and I've heard that people are loving those. Those are one of a kind. Save them, because that is the first ever, and you were there for it. And we thank you for being one of our huge sponsors. Thank you also to our other top sponsors: Arete, FPEA, Fisher Precious Metals, TBHC Group. We do have another top sponsor in the wing, but we're still working on those details to bring them on board, and you should see this updated soon. But we're excited about these opportunities because they allow us to fund the work that we do. Brenda did so much of the work early on without any key support, and we're just so thankful to be able to do this work and to be able to fund it properly and do it well and carry on the torch that she lit and started and ran with. So, or should I say hammer, because that's what it was at FPEA. Welcome. We have a couple of key guests with us this morning, so I'll introduce them. On my screen, they are top left is Kim Hannon, and she is the founder, and she runs the TBHC, the Tampa Bay Homeschool Conference, which is TBHC, and it's a great conference every year. It's the largest one in the Tampa Bay area. We're very thankful for her and all the work that she does with that community there. Hillsborough County is the largest county, last I checked, in the country, with the population density of homeschoolers. So they have the largest population density of homeschoolers in the country. So it's a big deal to be there and to be supporting such a big community. We thank you for being with us. She's also on the board of our nonprofit, HEF Connect, where a lot of the work that we do in advocacy and connecting home education families with opportunities after the K-12 journey, for support in life, the mentorships and apprenticeships and things like that, it resides there. And we're thankful that she's on the board with us. So we're glad to have her as a part of the team. Let me get y'all's mics on. We have Crystal on the top right, my wife. She's making her first appearance back since having the baby. And you can't see her, so that's an odd way to make a first appearance back. But I would imagine the baby is probably crying. So, and then we have Sue on my bottom left, Sue Pooch-Farron. She is the founder and director of HEED, which is the Home Education Enrichment Day. And it's one of the original, those OG, home education instructional programs down in South Florida. Is that South or is that like mid-South? What? It's South, technically. All right, good. And she's a blessing to the community there. She's helped so many other programs kind of understand the framework, to understand the needs of home education being parent-directed and parent-led, and how these groups kind of augment and support but not supplant the parents. And she's helped them with setting up their bylaws and their structure in ways that allow us to be free and to continue to be home education programs, not mini schools. And, that's been a hot topic of ours, but I love it when we get to have some of these original, pioneers in that area, because they ran into a lot of the problems and found solutions for them early on that a lot of the newcomers are not aware of. They see dollars dangling and they want to grab at it, and by all means innovate and have choice options. But there are a lot of pitfalls and a lot of areas in which it can easily get thrown out. And Sue has a great mind for those details, and she's been a very powerful advocate for Brenda over the years. And I'm still so thankful to have her on the board of HEF as well. So thank you all. That's a big, long introduction, but thank you all for being with us.
Thank you. It's fun to be back again, and to encourage families to understand the work that you're doing. And it's just so powerful, Jason. We're glad to have you here, and we appreciate. It's fun for me every week to see the update of what you've battled that week and what you're fighting on our behalf. I wish the people could see it in a day by day, like I get to. But thank you for your hard work, and we've had some great victories this year. I'm celebrating already.
Yeah, I'd like to share with our board the nitty gritty of what's going on, because they're in the weeds with me, and I appreciate that. I need that. And I appreciate their insight back whenever I throw these ideas, or in the moment by moment what's happening. Sometimes I wonder if I text them too much, but it's very helpful to kind of have, a finger on the pulse of both ends of things, what our needs are in the communities, as well as what's going on with the senators and representatives. If you want to follow and you want something more frequent than what's on our podcast every Monday, definitely jump in our Discord, because you will see legislative updates in our Discord. Some of what I post to our board does make it there, because it's also important for our community to be able to follow in real time the changes and the things that are going on. So that's flhef.org/Discord if you want to follow all the legislative updates. So, Kim?
And to be real, when we get those emails, we all give you our text thoughts back, and then we wait for Brenda to weigh in.
Yes.
And
She's
she always sets us all
she's
straight.
so important. Yeah. So important. She is not gone or forgotten. She's still involved. She just doesn't have to register and walk. And so that's great for her back. Yeah. Kim, welcome as well.
Thank you. It's good to be here. I'm glad it worked out for today. We're, in the middle of conference season, so it's a busy time. We're really excited about all the things that are, coming down the pike. So we're super excited to have a platform where we can support what you guys are doing, because at the end of the day, I know I've said it before, none of us can do what we do without you doing what you're doing. So thank you for allowing us to be able to serve our communities the way we do.
Thank you, because the support is critical and helping us get the word out, but also when families come together and pitch resources and support, it matters. It matters a lot, and it goes a very long way. Well, let's go ahead and dive into the legislative update for today. There's quite a bit. So, well, okay, Crystal, you're here. Now that you're on screen and here.
I'm muted for a reason, so I'm gonna just make this quick. He's a little fussy right now. I wanted everybody to actually be able to see him. This is the baby.
Hey, Arkin.
And then I'm gonna go ahead and mute and
Okay,
hop
all
back.
right. We'll see you later. I wasn't sure how much Crystal would be able to rejoin us, but the baby won't allow very much right now. So, but that's okay. We still run full steam ahead. So, let's jump into legislative update for the podcast. And if you've been wondering what happened, you saw that big bill at the beginning. We've been following it since around October, November. It's Senate Bill 318 was their big education bill, and it had things like the background screenings and all of the other stuff that we fought over last year. And then it kind of got grinded to a halt whenever session went doubly long than it's supposed to go. And pretty much every initiative went out the door except the basic funding of the whole program. No major changes. And we're looking about like that right now. Actually, the last activity on the bill was January 14th, which is almost an exact month ago. And so where it left off was in messages to the House. And so for all intents and purposes, that bill has died, unless the House picks it up for messages suddenly and decides that it's going to go back and forth and something's going to happen with it, which is not likely because I do not think that the House likes that bill. However, the House has been very focused on HB 1071, and its next stop is Tuesday morning. The Senate bill companion for it is Senate Bill 1090, and it hasn't seen as much action, but they've introduced a committee bill, Senate Bill 7036, and that general committee bill by the Pre-K-12 Senate committee is adopting a lot of the language that's from 1071. So you'll see 7036 move and 1071. Initially, what happens sometimes is these bills will have a companion bill, but then there's so much is going on one bill that they'll kind of wait, and one chamber will wait and see where that one lands before they make any major amendments. And then as that process happens, they might go, oh, well, we need to do a general committee bill and do a bunch of other things anyway. And then they'll adopt on. So it will have some sort of companionship as the general committee bill will move. So you'll look to see that most of those changes in that bill are not aimed at home education and not aimed at the scholarship as a whole. There's a couple of things. There is one little small piece of language that addresses the way that when PEP first came out and then they amended the statutes to allow for regular and direct contact at a private school to count for 2 or more days with regular and direct contact with the staff and a teacher, and then the rest of the days be filled according to the student learning plan with PEP. And that created this hybrid model for private school students to kind of choose PEP if they wanted a more flexible option. So they could kind of still be a private school student, but then also be a PEP student, but without it messing with their attendance records. And now they could kind of do private school, but more flexibly. So that they're opening that language up to also extend to FESUA students, so students on the Unique Abilities Scholarship, to be able to use that. And that's an interesting shift because there are a lot of private schools or smaller private schools that have programs that are good, really, really good for students with special needs. And sometimes it's an all regular and direct contact or nothing for them. And this gives them the option to go hybrid and be even more flexible and customized to what that student needs. So I think that's a powerful shift in their favor. It's still going to be very interesting because a lot of those students are going to be registered home education students. So they'll be registered as home education according to 1002.41, but then they'll also be enrolled in a private school. So that they're going to need to clean up internally how they report those so that there's not differences in reporting. We've seen some differences in reporting this week. We'll get to those too. There is a speech and debate bill that is coming up, and we're watching that one move. So far, it just seems like all good things. They're moving the Florida Civics and Debate Initiative outside of the DOE and making it its own organization, so that if the new governor comes in and it's just not on his radar, it's not important, and he reallocates resources, it doesn't kill that program. It'll be a standalone thing. So this is a good move. And then, of course, the bill that we've been really, really focused on, and I talked about in our intro, Senate Bill 538, which deals with the extracurriculars. There's another amendment to delete all and fix the language. There were several late filed amendments at the last committee stop. We were working with them to get parental empowerment language put back into that, because we had noticed that in rewriting all of the standards, they created a uniform criteria for all students, and then wiped out all the criteria that was home education specific. And in doing that, they also wiped out the requirement that the districts and entities overseeing those programs would have to collaborate with parents. And so we fought really hard to get that language put back in. In the end, they agreed with us and put that language back in. We're still working on the House to see where they'll land, because that bill hasn't been amended yet, but we're working really hard to ensure that as we go between, we're trying to protect and make sure that as a parent, you choose a home education program. It doesn't look like school. And that's one of the key issues. We'll get to that later. It's like a cultural difference that's emerging. But home education isn't school. It isn't homeschool. It's education, and it can look very vast and different. And there are people who don't like that. And I had conversations with some of the governing organizations, as this bill would call them, who don't quite see eye to eye. They think it's very important for the bureaucracy to be able to have efficient paperwork, and that all these custom ideas and parental freedoms kind of muck up the works. And, sorry, not sorry. I think parents should maintain their authority. And when home education doesn't have to look like public school in order to participate, then you have true freedom. If you take that away and give one set of criteria, and now we all have to have a certain GPA, we have to keep GPA, which we don't really keep GPA anyway, and the transcripts all have to look a certain way, and they're, then suddenly you're controlling the academic rigor of home education life by controlling whether or not they participate in sports, by having to have all those exact same standards. So there is still the language we fought and we got it, the language that keeps they're required to collaborate with parents on an agreed upon measure, so that they can find a way to approximate what that is by collaborating together. And so that's critical. Sorry. Maybe I'm talking too much on those things and I get really nerdy. I assume that people who come to the HEF podcast they're looking for that. And at least I hope so, because that's where I live. And then finally, there is with the newest amendment to this, they introduce language on allowing public schools and districts to assess fees to PEP students whenever they're playing or participating in extracurriculars. And I think this is a positive, but it needs to be, because a lot of districts are like, well, we don't know how to process fees. We can't allow you to play, or there's just a lot of confusion. So this is cleaning that up and saying you can assess fees, because for public school and home education students, the fees come down through the FEFP and the funding. And then for PEP, that funding goes over to the SFO and they can participate, but they need to use their funding to participate. And I think that's valid. It's just one of those things that the question is how. And the Home Education Foundation doesn't like that the specific language addressed the per student amount based on the district costs for the program, because it's not specific enough. Does that mean the district's costs initially for the program when they pull the FEFP funding over and then fund the program, like say football? Or does that mean it includes all the costs of the program, including the ticket sales and the booster clubs and all the end costs that it takes to run the program, their actual direct costs, and then dividing that up per student? So those are two totally different numbers at the end of the day. And I've done the calculations on the averages and the average football team size and the average, football program and the FEFP funding that comes down from the district and gets allotted over to them. And the numbers could vary anywhere from $400 to $4,000 just to play football. So this is very important for them to get right. And the next stop is tomorrow, 9 a.m. in the Rules Committee. So hopefully we'll see some of these discussions take place, very valid discussions take place. Michelle Matthews Wilson says, am I understanding you that with this, PEP students would need to pay a fee not charged to home education students or public school students? Yeah, so the way that the funding works is the state FEFP funding comes down and goes to the district, and then the district takes a set amount of that funding, which is given to them based off of their per student enrollment reports. So they take their per student calculations, and then they draw down funds from the budget for their district, and then they take a amount of that and appropriate it to a sports program. And for participation in those, the PEP is a different mechanism of funding. So the actual funding for those programs doesn't go to the program or the district. It goes to the scholarship funding organization. And so it is a valid way for them to charge PEP, but it needs to be reasonable. And it very much needs to be reasonable. We've seen differences from $2,000 just for the good graces of being able to participate in extracurriculars, and they're just calling it a extracurricular fee, all the way to like $200 or $150 or none in some cases. They just let the students play, and there's no real guidance right now that the districts have from the DOE or from the program itself on what that looks like or needs to look like. So they're trying to put something like that in place. And so, yeah, that to answer your question, PEP students would need to pay a fee. Now, there are guardrails in this that means that it needs to be applied uniformly. So essentially, the allotment that they're getting from the state on a per student amount would be what they would reasonably charge to PEP students, not milk PEP for whatever they feel is their deficit. So that's a critical thing that we're watching to make sure. This is proposed, not current. Yeah. So this is in the proposed bill. This doesn't mean that it has gone through. Now, that doesn't mean that the districts cannot charge an extracurricular fee right now. They can. And they do, but there's no requirement that it actually be uniform. And so that's very, very important. Because of the way that the language is set up, where it defines PEP as having the same flexibilities and opportunities as home education students, they're required to provide the same opportunity and the same flexibility for it. In that open area, there is room for them to charge a fee, but there's no guidelines or guardrails on what that fee has to look like. And so they're trying to establish something that is a loose framework, but give them a framework so that they can assess that without seeing some of the astronomical fees that we are. I just think that this language still is too vague to keep that from being astronomical. So I think that's really important. I'm very interested to see how Rules discusses this as we move forward. So tomorrow is going to be a big day. We'll report back and let you guys know. That's a lot to have covered. If there's any questions, if you two have any questions on that, or if anybody has questions, post them in the chat, and we'll also get to those. We've also seen, this week we had 300 families on PEP that were caught in a cross-check misfire, we'll call it. The Bay County school district reported them improperly, and they were flagged, and then they were all told, they were in jeopardy of losing their scholarship, but they've been reported as being in attendance at public school. They had not. Some of them have never attended public school, so they're scratching their heads trying to figure out how that worked. So we immediately were able to get in, those families came into Discord. We were able to coordinate communication and get with our contacts at the Department of Education and get with our contacts at Step Up for Students to kind of help quickly resolve this. I don't take credit for any of the work, just being the go-between and having a community that's alert and involved in our Discord allows us to be on top of advocating for these issues. So we're very thankful for all the parents who participated in that and jumped on Discord to help us get that information. It's so much easier to do it in one thread than to be responding to 300 emails. So thank you for helping me be efficient over here in the work that we do while we're still fighting over bills. All right. Then Teen Pact was also this past week, and they did an amazing job. Jessica Wells is the state coordinator for Florida, and just an amazing job. Watching those kids be hands-on and learning how the legislative process works, running for governor, senator, proposing bills, amendments, objections, yield the well, all the fun stuff. And it was great to see a lot of young people not so TikTok brained out. You know, they were sharp. They were a sharp bunch, and I'm proud to say most of them were homeschoolers. Right? It's such a great. It's difficult, you know, to do it in the middle of a week like that for a whole week if you're not homeschooling. But what a beautiful experience to be able to not just read about how it works in a book, but to come to the Capitol, sit in their chairs, and do it and learn. It's so great. It's so great. There was a moment where I was on the portico, the outside with them, and they were handing out these what do you call them? Surveys. They were trying to get surveys on freedom of speech and what does that mean, and you know, really good questions from just anybody that walked by. And I know the Attorney General's chief of staff, and so I pointed to the kids and I was like, go ask that guy right there. Pick his brain and see what he says. And I was like herding them over there because I was like, if you want to hear what anybody has to think, you should figure that guy out, see what he has to think. And they had a great experience. So I'm thankful, Jessica. Thank you for the hard work that you do. You did an amazing job. And I know they've got like 3 more weeks of this. So keep it up. See it through to the end. And good for you. While I was there.
Yeah, it's a great program. We have kids going up this upcoming week. Not this week now, but next week they'll be up there.
Yeah. I'm trying to see if we can get our project in as like a lunch thing for them to do our quiz game. Because I think it'd be really fun for them while they're eating to just do like a quiz game. It'd be great.
Yeah. Yeah.
While I was there, I got asked a couple of times by parents, you know, who we had talked about Brenda and kind of like me kind of taking over for her. And they were like, oh, well, okay, great. Well, are there any threats to homeschooling right now? You know, and I was scratching my head like, you don't know? Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Well, sure.
Yeah. Every day.
So we talked about a couple of the bills that we're working on right now with them, and you know, the general, you know, there wasn't a big attention span. Let me just put it that way. A lot of times people ask that question, but they're not ready for what's on the other end of it. So I have to pump the brakes and go, okay, maybe you were just saying hi.
Yeah.
Oh man.
I think in that regards, like with that question, I think one of the things that people underestimate or don't understand is that it's not just the bills that are directly about home education. It's anything at all regarding parenting and children and education in schools. There could be just one little line put in a bill that just starts to shake the foundation of what we have built and what Brenda has spent so long working on. It's not just the home education bills that you have to watch. It's literally anything about children and parenting in the entire state. One line is all it takes to just shake things up in a really scary way.
Absolutely. I mean, I'll just peel this back and reveal the next topic, which is, you know, home education instructional programs got put in statute without a definition. So now anybody and everybody who wants to be involved in the scholarship program and offer courses or just full on, you know, drop off programs that aren't really homeschooling, but all of them only fit under one moniker because that was the only moniker that existed, and that moniker doesn't have a definition. It has one, but it's in the purchasing guide, so it's not strictly enforced. So, yeah, and it's a good example.
We worked hard on that. Excuse me, we worked hard on that definition because we didn't want right now we have the lanes of public school, private school, and home education. And when people pulled out of school, the public or the private, there was really just one place to go, and that was home
Right.
education. But now, I think probably since COVID, and even more so since the scholarship, when they're pulling out of public and private, and good for them that they are,
Mhm.
they aren't opting for home education. They're opting for alternative
Yeah.
schooling,
Mhm.
whether that's a micro school, which has no definition, or a hybrid school, which I don't believe has a definition, or co-oping, and all of the terms that we used to use,
Yeah.
umbrella schools, and all kinds of words that weren't legal. So they're only going private, public, home education. And my concern is, as we get people that are not educating their own children, but making the choices for how to educate their own children. Good
Yeah.
for them. They're not opting to home educate them themselves, but they're opting to put them in a private program. And
Mhm.
I think that home education needs to be differentiated between these alternative schooling choices. Because if the alternative schooling choices have an issue or have problems, it's going to look like home education has issues and has problems.
Mhm.
So right now, we're all in one big pot called
Yeah.
home education, but we're not all home educating.
No.
Some are, and some are making choices for other people to do it for them. And that's
Mhm.
no criticism, but I want to differentiate. And there's no differentiating as of right now that I know of in the law. So if you're not in public or private, you're in home education. And then DEP muddies that a little bit, but in a way that we could work. But to define home education instructional program, which really is a tutor to help mom. It may be group tutoring and dad, but it's assistance for parents to do the job. It's not, we'll do the job for you. That's a different animal. And it's my hope that we can differentiate between parents who are schooling their kids and parents who are making their children's school decisions.
Mhm. There's also a
Right now-
regulation piece of it too, right? Because when you're dealing with dropping your children off for a program, whether it's 3 days a week or 5 days a week, there's regulations. There's the background check component where if you are leaving your kid alone with someone for a full day, there's going to be a different level of need for a background check versus they're in a co-op class for an hour when you're sitting in the lobby of the church, right?
Or you're all the parents are still there.
And then just also the other components that come up with regulations as far as student behavior when you have a child who is away from their parent all day. There's so many pieces of it that as home education instructional programs, we don't have to deal with because it's not in our lane of things that we have to deal with. But those things are going to have to be regulated in some way. And if those regulations happen for the places where they need to happen without the differentiation, those regulations are going to come down on us. And it's going to put a lot of home education instructional programs in a really bad place, potentially even where they're going to have to close their doors because they can't live up to the standards that shouldn't even apply to them anyway.
Well, in Step Up, we did put definitions in Step Up. Things like background check, things like not in a residential home. But because it wasn't in law,
It just gets pushed out.
these alternative school organizations came in and said, no, we're homeschooling because home education is parent signs off and takes control of it. And then they're delegating their control. We want to keep differentiate between parents who are home educating their children and parents who are delegating it to a program. And that's okay to do that, but we're not the same. And there are going to be problems. And you're right, Kim. If there's problems, it's going to reflect on us, and we're going to suffer the possibility of losing so many of the freedoms that we've worked for 40 years to keep.
It's important to keep our minds clear on what are rights, what are the legal terms, and then what are comfortable terms, right? The normalized general terms, right? There's no definition of a co-op. There's no definition of school choice, right? These are popular terms that we use, and they're thrown around a lot. Home education instructional program does have a mention, but it doesn't have a definition. Actually, in one of the bills that we were working on, they tried to create an amendment that said, well, homeschool students wouldn't be charged this. And I said, well, what's a homeschool student? Isn't a PEP student a homeschool student? And they were like, well, I mean, I said, so do you mean a home education student? Because home education programs are defined in statute 1002.41, but homeschool student isn't defined as a term anywhere. It's not even really used anywhere else. But even our senators and representatives get so used to using the terms on a general level that we get comfortable with what we think they mean until we're trying to find a distinction and a difference and go, okay, well, hang on a second. Because if I say homeschool students aren't charged this, but then I said PEP students are charged this, but then I say homeschool students aren't charged this, are those not homeschool students then? Or are they? Because now you've changed the definition functionally, but then you would at that point go, well, where in statute are homeschool students defined? And the answer to that is not, right? So
Nowhere.
it's home education or it's personalized education students. So and those are, man, they sound like semantics, but they're not. They're not. Because at the end of the day, all of the home education people, all of them that I know, really want to pull back. One of the key characteristics, they're pulling back from systems that they feel no longer fit their needs. And they're approximating and approaching the concept of doing it themselves, right? I want to pull my kid from this system, public school, private school, charter school, whatever, and I want a different path. And right now what's happening is they're pulling them and they're going, hey, I want another program. And that's great. That's fine. They're free to do that. And I want them to have that. However, they're on the journey toward don't like these systems, want to do it myself. They just haven't landed at the very tip end of that journey on the like, fine, I'm doing it myself. Enough is enough, right? And I think that's one of the big threats to homeschooling right now is that there is not a widespread agreement and there's not a widespread understanding of what we mean by homeschooling. So I see the media talking constantly about, oh, the money is coming out. I saw an article Friday or Saturday about, or no, it was Sunday morning actually, and it was about the schools in, was it Volusia County or St. John's County are losing funding, and the public schools are losing funding because of private schools, vouchers, and homeschools popping up everywhere. And I'm like, well, there's no such thing as a homeschool popping up anywhere. That's not what homeschooling is.
Except in your kitchen.
And the more that we embrace the misuse of language, it just becomes normal. And I'll give you an example that all the kids will get, and it's this: 6-7, 6-7. The more you use it, it means nothing, but the more you use it, the more real it becomes, and then you have no power to stop it, even if it's nonsensical, right? So homeschooling.
I mean, you argue that it's not semantics, but I would argue that it is, and I would argue that semantics is actually super important.
I agree with that fully. Thank you, Kim.
Semantics is all about the semantics and having those definitions for those terms, because home education and homeschool and alternative school are not interchangeable at all. They are three very different things. One could potentially argue that homeschool, you pull them out and then you have alternative versus home education under that umbrella of homeschool, right? Because there are times when those kids who are in an alternative path are at home. There are components where the parents are doing things, right? They're choosing to not have them in a higher level program, but that's very different from home education, and where the education is happening outside of the boundary of any type of school. And the definition, I mean, it's not where our focus is, because our focus is home education and protecting that. But I would argue for protecting the micro schools and these other businesses that are coming in because of the scholarship, the lack of definition is going to hurt them also. Because if there's no definition and no standard, anyone can start something and call it that. And that's not healthy, because you can say, oh, we're micro school. You know, we have this micro school, and it's someone sitting with a bunch of kids doing worksheets all day. That's not school. You know, where you have these other businesses where they are actually, they're doing it right and they're doing it well, but they're not being protected either in this. So it's a protection
Or
for
what
both
about this?
sides, really.
I had someone approach me from the legislature. I'm not going to say who or which chamber they were even in. And they said that they had an idea because they were inspired by working with me that they want to do a report and figure out, what parcels of unused land there are in public use and commit some of those to homeschool programs, and I was like, well, yeah, that'd be great. It'd be even really, really cool if you could grant use of them to micro schools. The problem is you can't because they don't exist. They aren't defined. So you can't give a privilege or a right to an undefined entity. The reason why we got home education defined originally was to grant it as a specified, spelled out right. You can't grant a right that isn't defined, or access to something that's undefined. The need for definitions is important. And right now, the only word that exists is home education instructional program. And because of that, all of the programs are called this. And so whenever, like Sue pointed out, someone does something dubious or devious, because there are people who do those things, period. Whether they're public schoolers. I saw someone recently in the news for, inappropriate contact with children from public schools. You're going to see that in private schools. You're going to see that in charter schools. You're going to see that in homeschooling because it's human is the problem. The problem is we all make mistakes. There are errors in judgment. Everyone across the board. No form of schooling is immune to poor judgment. It just exists. So when it happens, and the only word that exists is the home education instructional programs, they're the ones going to get slapped with ridiculous regulations, and then they're all going to be treated the same unless there's a firewall of definition between them where I go, hey, look, these programs where the parents are involved, they're not full-day daycare drop-off programs. There's more parental involvement constantly. Or let's say, I don't know how you measure it, because people have thrown this one around to me. They say, well, the parent is responsible for at least 50% of the primary instruction. And I'm like, that's a wonderful starting point, but that's not clear. That's not clear language. Like, who's going to measure the 50%? Is it going to be measured in time? Is it going to be measured in amount of content? Is it going to be measured in curriculum or number of subjects? Like, there's no clarity on that specificity. So you can start there conceptually, but you've got to get to language that allows it, to narrow and.
Yeah, you need to iron out the details of what exactly 50% of what, right? And it may even be 50% of all the above.
So we've been working on some of those key differences being they're not drop-off programs. There's a difference. But
they're not drop-off programs longer term, because I would argue that an HEIP could be a drop-off because my kids are in one. And it's one day and they're there for things like cooking and sewing. And my son takes a science class because he loves science. But right. I'm not passing that off on anyone. That's just,
but if I drop off,
I'm a working mom who homeschools my kids, so I drop them off on Tuesday because it's the only day I've got to work.
On a day for a class or 2 classes, that's totally different than 4 days a week from 9 to 3 for the core of their instructional time. And, I still think as we, are talking about these differences, and I hope people listening are catching that diving into the specific language is so key, but understanding conceptually the shift that's happened in the culture is more important right now, because there's no language right now that limits it. But we've got to wrap our heads around the cultural shift that's happened, and then bring the language into alignment and protect both. Because
Jason, it's my understanding, you can correct me if I'm wrong, that the reason that we chose home education instructional program as our legal name is because home education program is already defined. And that's what Kim is doing in her house now. So she is a home education program because
That's
she
great.
is a family that's
Yep.
doing that. And when we homeschooled our children, we were a home education program. So when we were trying to find out these co-op tutoring programs, that's where we came up with home education instructional
Yes.
program. They would be instructional programs for
For
those
the existing home education
to
program
augment
that's
them.
already
Yes.
there.
That's not, I did a conference this past weekend, and that's not what people were looking
Mhm.
for. They were looking for alternative
Mhm.
schooling.
Mhm.
It was an excellent conference. But it's interesting because the vendors were not Saxon, Bob Jones, Sunlight. What was for me, where we would go and get our hands on books that we were going to use
Yep.
with our children. The vendors were this, and they were all great. So, but it's just a shift. It's a total cultural shift. They were here. We're a nature program where you can come and we'll do your homeschooling for nature. And I love the opportunities it gives, but it also sends a message that, Mom, maybe you're not enough, what you're doing at your house. And that we didn't have that pressure when I was doing this 20 years ago. There were not that many other choices. We all had Coach Rick, of course, who does an incredible PE program around the state. But it wasn't, everybody doing that. And I think they're all great choices for families, but I don't want it to undermine the mom who says, gosh, am I enough to educate my
Yes.
children? Because we want to send you a message.
Yes.
We did this for 40 years with no money, state, with no extra tutors and special places.
Yes.
And that we were enough.
Oh my
And
goodness.
you
Say
are
that
enough.
again.
And that's what I want parents to know,
Yes.
not to be looking left or
Yes.
right. Our instructional program came about when we got to high school, and we were like, hey, let's get together, get a great chemistry teacher, and get 6 or 8, students together and let them kind of develop a passion for working. And that's sort of what it came out of. But that was to help moms. So they may come one day to their instructional program and do chemistry labs and learn the chapter, but they're going
Yes.
home for 4 days to work with mom and or dad to go back and show up next week with that tutor to
Sue,
take them through some of
You're
those
getting
harder
all
subjects.
of the cheering in the chat right now. They're like, yes, Sue, Sue the truth. Yes, yes, yes. Go, Sue, go. Yeah. You're getting all the cheers and the claps of the applause. So yes, you're on the money, and that cultural shift that's happening is driving the bigger part of the conversation, because that's the part that's being advertised. Look at all of these schools. I've seen some of the corporations that I've been doing research on have, before they even touched the Florida scholarship, already had 53 million in annual gross profit. And I'm watching these like MLM structures pop up and all of these other kind of ways of doing it. And they're advertising everywhere constantly. You're on your homeschool journey. Do it with us. Like, I mean, that could be a curriculum, but like what they're really doing is logging into your thing, and you're taking it over for them. And that cultural shift where you've got people coming out of a system they've decided doesn't work for them, and they're on their way. They're like running on a track, and there's hurdles, and they're like, and like one of the hurdles on the way to like the do-it-yourself thing is they keep running into all these programs that promise they'll do it for them. We'll just take it over. Well, I know you don't like those, but we're different from those. We'll do it for you, but we'll do it better, and it'll look like this. And man, I encourage parents, keep skipping those hurdles. Do what you can do.
It's going to be expensive to lobby against those kind of
Yes,
companies
it
too.
is.
We are going to need families supporting what you're doing,
Yeah.
Jason, because you're up against budgets that are 100
huge.
times greater than
53
ours.
million they can throw at lobbying and lawyers.
That's not more.
Jeez. Yeah. Look, you're right though, and I want to echo in this conversation, parents, you are enough. You are enough, and I will say it because education is not a destination. Like, it isn't. I know that we're so used to 4th grade, and my kids get asked every time we take them to the Capitol. They get asked, "What grade are you in?" And they look dumbfounded at these representatives and senators. They're like, and they don't know how to answer it. And so I go, well, he's reading books on this level, and he's doing math over on this level. And I'll give them an idea of the difficulty level of what they're doing. But education's not a destination. The whole thing is a process and journey. The truth is, the world is full of information, and you can't possibly learn it all in a lifetime. But you can throw yourself at it, and your kids can throw themselves at it. And it's so important to figure out what really piques their interest in that, and let them dive deep. Do they love chess? Go hard, go deep, be obsessive, like dominate it, conquer everything that they could, even the math and the numbers and there's so much that applies to all kinds of other things in life, moving to this job or that board meeting and discussions and how to public speak or the importance of this, that you can branch out to from chess. Do they love science and rockets, going out and turning things over, or just being out in nature? Great, awesome. There's so many paths in life that you can build a sustainable life out of, that you can get there. And that ultimately, if there is a destination of education, it's that one: to be formidable in life, to be able to get back up when you fall down, to be able to take care and provide for a family, or move on and find that level of success in life. If it had a destination, that would be it. But education in and of itself, we've settled for this idea that it's like compartmentalized, and each step has its own destination and has to be a track. Somebody said at Team Pack this week, they said something to the effect of like, I'm just afraid my kids are going to fall behind or this. And they were sharing what other parents have said to them and how they've tried to coach parents through behind in what? Like, there's no destination.
People all the time. Behind is just a social. It's a social construct built by public school. Behind, are they better than they were yesterday? Did they learn something yesterday? Right. Well, that's behind. There is no behind.
Well, the system we're comparing ourselves to is 27th and 34th in the world.
Yep.
So you never asked me for my 27th best recipe on something.
Say that
right?
louder.
So we're measuring ourselves by a failed system. At 4 years old, we're number one in the world. And at 15, we don't even show up behind countries I never heard of.
Yeah.
Like, it's crazy.
Yeah. I mean, I say to people all the time.
Go back to.
Yeah. I mean, I say to people all the time when they're like, I just don't know if I can do it. I'm like, why are you fighting so hard to keep your kid in a system that left you feeling incapable of teaching
Oh, my word.
them?
Yes. Yes.
Right? Like, why are we doing this? Like, pull them, like, no, just pull them out. What are we doing?
Well, we're so drawn. The bait that is being fished with, that we're drawn to, is this idea that there's a system out there that can do it better. And there's not. There is not. Every system is practice. It's just practice. Some of it works, some of it doesn't. And on a given day, it works with one kid and doesn't work with that same kid on another day. And it's all just...
certainly doesn't work with their younger sibling.
Yeah. But your kids best.
Right now, we've gone digital with these kids. And there is no positive data on digital technology for education. And what is out there is negative. So we are giving our kids, every school gave them an iPad. Now we're looking at the detriment to their education. If we were going to look at the number one, though, Jason, there is one ranked. So if we were to copy a system, I would say, well, who's best in the world usually, and what are they doing? And that's typically Finland, and they don't start school till 7. Why? Because all of those years of play and curiosity and adventure are building the neural, and the neurons, we can actually see this now, the network that's going to be the scaffolding for higher education. But we're skipping that completely, and we're shutting down their brains, and we can actually measure what neurons look like. I have this one slide I love to use. It's a dendrite. If you remember those in their history. And they have lots of branches. Well, there's one here's a dendrite on workbooks, and it's all shriveled up. And here's a dendrite on adventure and play and creativity. And it's actually a healthy brain cell. So we can actually measure that doing the system, guys, is physically damaging brain cells. and
Yeah.
letting our kids play and discover and adventure and not sit in a chair for 5 to 8 hours a day, which is harming their body. Like there's science now backing it up.
Mhm.
Science says if your little children at 2 and 3 are on an iPad, there are mental issues in their
Yeah.
lives
I don't want to
Yeah.
disagree with you.
because of the pleasure centers. Like it's a little scary to be
Mhm.
dabbling in things that the culture says are
I
the
don't
new
want to
thing.
disagree with you, but what
Right.
I'm about to say is going to sound like that. So I just want to be clear before I say it that I don't disagree with you at all. Okay. But we shouldn't need science to tell us that. I shouldn't need some expert from AMA or any other place who's got a piece of paper that tells everybody that told them they know what they're talking about. I should be able to look into the eyes of my child, and I should be able to experiment with my child and come up with things for them to practice. And I should be able to watch them grow and blossom or shrivel and shrink. And I should be able to pivot and adapt on the fly, throw out what doesn't work and move to something that does work. And as the parent, I should have that right at every single step. Not in a program, not to choose one program over another program or to try to figure out who's who or who has propped up some program or some celebrity does this or that or some people have pieces of paper that tell them they're smart. No, I should be able to daily look into the eyes of my child and speak life into them and open their minds and tease out curiosity and figure out, you're like, oh, you don't know this. Okay, let's jump into that. And let me show you how to jump into things in general. And there's a statement that sticks in my head, and it says, what you feed grows, what you starve dies. You take the child and you find out what they're interested in. You feed it. You feed it. It'll grow. It'll grow, and their mind will attach all. Once they've expounded this amount, they'll add more from that, and it'll constantly grow. And if you starve their curiosity, it dies. And that's
I'll never forget when Jacob, my middle son, when he was in kindergarten, his small group leader, we did Awana at our church, and his small group leader at Awana was a retired kindergarten teacher. And she came to me one day and she said, be so thankful you're homeschooling, because if he was in school, they would squash out every bit of what makes him who he is. Because he was just, I mean, he was the kid who would, like, his math lessons looked like PE class, right?
Upside down.
And spinning on the chair and always constantly moving. If we'd be reading a book, he had to be playing with Legos or playing, like, he had to be constantly doing something. He could not sit still. And she said they would destroy everything about him the way God made him to be for whatever his destination is. And I think about that so often, and I'm so thankful that we were able to do that so that he is able to grow into, and now he's like on the robotics team, and watching him problem solve and do these really difficult things and sitting for a long period of time to solve these problems. But would he have had that? What would not be in him anymore, if we had squelched that spirit?
NASA did an experiment, Kim, just about that. And they took 4-year-olds and they came out with 98% of 4-year-olds are geniuses.
Wow.
And then they watched these kids and they checked them at 8 and 10 and 12. When they graduated high school, 12% were geniuses from 98%. And then they also polled adults, and that was 2%. And NASA commissioned Dr. George Land to do this in the 60s. And he came when he was done, because they didn't want knowledge. They wanted problem solvers, critical. Think of Apollo 13. Like, they had to figure out stuff, right? How to make a square.
The knowledge, they'll teach you the knowledge you need. They want you to go outside the box.
Exactly. And he said 100% he attributed this creative, the ability to not think creatively to school. That they were taught to be uncreative in their 12 years of school.
If I could
well, of course they were, because that's what the system was created for, right?
So if I would hone in on the thing, is it's our drive to lean on a system because it gives predictable results, and I can go, oh yeah, I know this, I'll order that, or there's this systematic approach, and the more we lean on the system, the less we retain, because the system does that. Look at your GPS. GPS is a great example, right? Like when I was a kid growing up and I didn't have GPS, I had to pull out a map, figure out where I was going, and then I created a mental map, and I knew where I was, and I knew the directions. And once I got GPS, I didn't have to remember where anything is anymore. I follow the blue line. If my GPS stops working in town, I'm not proud of this. If my GPS stops working in town, I'm gonna have to stop and ask for directions, because I have no idea where some of these things are that I've been to before. I'm learning. I've intentionally been turning my GPS off to regrow that part of that learning. But it's the abdication of critical thinking or thought to a system, because a system will take care of me, and that's where knowledge dies. That's where the brain, the thinking, the power dies. It starves out.
Jason, I wanted to just reiterate one thing you said, or comment on one thing you said about knowing your own child. The scripture that we all know, train up a child in the way he should go. If you do a deep dive on that scripture, the word should was added later, and it was not a behavioral type of scripture, like train them up in church and they'll always be Christians. Or the way that it is interpreted is train up a child in their bent, in their knack, in their giftings. And when they are old, they will not depart from it. You have a rocket guy, I have a rocket guy too. Train up a child to be a rocket guy with his passions, with his chasing, engineering, whatever that leads to. And when he's old, he'll be doing what God created him to do. That's perhaps it's a different take on that scripture, but it's one that I don't see the other one always being true. This one I do.
Oh,
we've learned that backwards.
It's amazing. And it's, it's why it's so important to recognize each of your kids and where their path is headed, right? Like I look at my daughter, like we've had this conversation, like she has flat out said, like, I'm not going to college. I don't care. I will never go to college. And I'm like, fine. So you want to go to culinary school? You want to learn, like she's a baker and she wants to be a better baker. That's great. You go be the best baker that you can be. You don't need college for that. And that's fine.
And who knows that better than you, Kim? Who will know that about her better than you? No one.
No.
And you know what? Through baking, because I have a daughter that does the exact same thing. And through baking, they find ways to be altruistic. They find ways to learn math. And they'll find ways to learn science and compounds and this and like, oh, that's not healthy. My kids, they love to bake cookies. And I'm like, yo, you got to start baking stuff daddy can eat, because I can't always do that. Let me show you why I had to burn enough kcals to stay this way and healthy. And like, y'all making me work too hard.
Well, she created a business with it. We have the farmers market that our homeschool group had started. And so she's had the opportunity to learn about supply and demand and how much to make and how much to charge for products. And then she has a spreadsheet that we input all of that information in. And I had a realization one day when we were working on our spreadsheet and putting in all the information after, we looked at the Walmart shopping list and how much did you spend and how much did you make? And we're putting all these formulas in, and I'm like, you don't have to know the complicated math to get to this. You just need to know what formula to put in to get the information you need. That's the math that you're going to need for your life, right? And like recognizing that is different than my son who's on the robotics team, who's going to be some type of ridiculous engineer. I don't even know what, but he needs algebra 1 in 7th grade, right? So, but it's just to be able to see your kids for who they are and to help them be secure in that, and then to be able to guide them to whatever the best version of that can be. And that only happens in home education.
The question was, are there threats to homeschooling? The answer is yes. Someone is always willing to sell you something if you are willing to buy it. And Dina is correct. Kids are not robots to be programmed with a system of information to be recalled and tested. Kids are unique souls with individual gifts and needs that parents are privy to at the deepest level. And your child's a person that you can help stand on their feet. But there are
Mhm.
at any point along the way, in the freedom and the pursuit of self-governance of that, you can quit. You can abdicate self-governance for a better this system. It's not as bad as that system, but this system. And that, man, that hits curriculum systems as well. Don't be sold on just one curriculum. Pick and choose, splice it, take this,
Mhm.
take that. Frankenstein together the thing that works for you. Like, find out and experiment that, like, what works for one kid won't even work for the other kid in the same house. So, like, it's not like you're going to just be able to, like, buy one curriculum and like commit, nor could you buy one micro school, and nor could you just abdicate everything to a public school or private school. They're not all created equal, and your child is yours. So pour into them, and you don't have to buy. If you have a scholarship or you don't have a scholarship, it's the same. You don't have to buy
Mhm.
into what anyone is trying to sell you. Be judicious. Be very judicious. Be very guarded with your own kids and their minds. And by all means, embrace the freedoms that we have fought so hard to protect. The parents' right to teach their own child and set their own standards. If you have a
Mhm.
small group of somebody that aligns with you and y'all are in sync, do it. Great. I'm not saying
Mhm.
don't. Micro schools aren't bad.
Mhm.
Micro schools aren't bad, but this wave of abdication that's coming into the do-it-yourself space of home education,
Mhm.
that's mucking up the culture. And I'll tell you where the
Yeah.
Home Education Foundation sits. We sit very hard on the do-it-yourself approach, that we protect that bright line
Mhm.
of parents with their kids being the ones to teach, set them up, prop them up, pour into their souls, their creative minds, open that mind up to the world of information that's out there, not just what somebody in some building says is appropriate for a first grader. Like, I want my kids. One of my kids is 6 years old and he's doing like, uh, what's the word for it? I just lost it. Baby brains kicking in. To the power of square roots. He's doing square roots and he's reading Harry Potter books. Like, that's wild to me. I feel like that if he were in a kindergarten class right now, he would be bored to tears because
He would be.
jeez, he
Yeah.
would be learning though. He'd be learning how to either adapt in that system or break that system or
He'd be learning how
what
to
gets him sent
avoid
home.
the things. He'd be learning how to rush. He'd be learning how to procrastinate. I mean, I'll tell
Yeah.
you, it was like you learn all these really bad habits that you then spend your entire adult life trying to undo.
Yeah, and then
That's
the
what
real
happens.
education comes from the Barnes and Noble self-help section. So
Yeah.
Angelique says, Brenda was there for me when no one else was 20 years ago. I appreciate the work you guys do. You know, listen, there's comments all through here talking about unschooling method and, you know, cheering Sue on for her comments. And I just want to say thank you, everyone in comments today. This is such a powerful, uh, I don't even know if we've seen this many comments previously. And I'm here for it and I love it. Bring this conversation over to Discord because we're going to have to cut the podcast. We've got to go. I've got things I've got to get to work on doing. But I appreciate all of you for being here for this. And Sue, thank you for taking the time out of your busy day, and Kim, yours as well, to be with us and discuss this. I think these things are critical and they matter so much more. And there are conversations happening in the Capitol right now as to they're fraud. There's fraud and there's predators, and they're like, how do we stop them? You know, how do we turn the spigot off for them without hurting parents' choice? And I'm trying. I'm jumping into these conversations, trying to help them understand what homeschooling really is, how it looks, what the beautiful benefits are. If you are so inclined, go to our website, flhef.org, and there is a button right at the top in the menu for Tell Your Story. It's a project that we have where you can create a reel. There's some guidelines there that you can follow. If you have your own ideas, do those. But in essence, what we're looking for is, you know, why did you choose to home educate your kids? What impact were you hoping that it would have? What impact are you seeing it have? And what does it look like for you? And my goal for this is for representatives and senators and leaders in other places to see the beauty of the difference and approach and all the unique children and all the unique approaches and all the unique benefits, and to embrace that, to see its effectiveness, and to want to protect what it effectively produces rather than just want to get back to protecting this bureaucratic system, because people be people and we do bad things, because that's going to happen everywhere. So, well, thank you. Ladies, what would you like to say, wrap up or sum up or leave a message to our audience for the day? I usually give Brenda last word. She's not here. So you guys take in turn and tell me, you get last word.
Oh boy. I mean, I think that, Sue earlier kind of hit the nail on the head with just knowing your child and the importance of the verse that you shared. I think that's I love the spin on that, and recognizing that we need to just know who our kids are and help guide them in that path, in that direction, and trust that it may look different than what we thought for them, and it may look different than what culture says is what we should be doing, but we need to just rest and know that we know them best, and it's why we're doing this, and just trust what God has given us in our right of being able to direct them the way they're supposed to go.
Good.
And I just want everyone to realize that it's been a battle for 40 years.
Mm-hmm.
And it's
Yep.
still a battle. Brenda
Mhm.
fought it, Jason's fighting it, and we need every one of you on our side. If we used to say if we had $1 from every homeschool in Florida, we would have no budget issue.
Mm.
So we really need the support. We need to come together. We need to support Jason and this work. So if you know about the Home Education Foundation, your job is to make sure your friends and your community know about the home education. The convention that I was just at, they didn't know about it. No, there's not a new mom in there that has even a clue. One mom had a few different questions, and I said, I knew they were all on the Discord. So I just went over and told her, I said, you need to go on here. Everything you're looking for, all of your questions, they're on there, they're being addressed. And if they're not, you have a voice in the Capitol, and that voice is Jason right now, being mentored still by Brenda. We're so blessed. So we want to bless you, Jason, and thank you. And I want to encourage everybody, if we want to see this movement continue and these freedoms stay free, we need to support having a voice. Even when you gave your update today, all of those things that you're addressing, had you not been there, curriculum, extracurricular would look different this fall. And it's not going to because of the work of Jason, and we need to support that and realize that we have something to fight for.
Yeah.
So we need everybody. We need to all come together financially, in prayer, and in encouragement too, because he's got long, hard days, and he's got a house full of little ones, and he's a busy man. So we thank you, Jason, so much.
I hadn't thought about it until you said it that way, and I was like, oh man, you're so right. Oh. Yeah, it's worth it though, being up until midnight working on these things and seeing the breakthroughs where they hear us and we get through. I'm there for it. I'm so glad I opened up the closing to the two of you, because you both said it so fantastically. So without anything further, I'm going to go back to our top sponsors and say thank you to our top sponsors for what you do. The support that we receive is so important. So important, as you've just heard. And I want to say thank you to the parents in the free state of Florida who do support us. And if you are someone who finds value in this podcast, just share it out and make sure that other people know and can be a part of this whole thing that we're doing. So thank you all, and have a great Monday. You can have it back now. Thank you.